Welcome back, YouTube. So, in this episode, we're going to discuss the 5 things that I really dislike about Linux. Now, I definitely am a Linux proponent and I enjoy using Linux, and there are many, many benefits, one of which, of course, is open source software and the fact that it keeps the cost down. But let's be honest, there are some issues with Linux that make it difficult to use at times, even frustrating. So without further ado, I'm going to go through my top 5 dislikes for using Linux. First of all, Fedora Linux and other distros don't have Google Drive or tools. Now I know that Ubuntu does support Google Drive, but you can't find it in other Linux distributions. I know what you're thinking. It really is a problem with Google, but is it? Yes, Google could supply Google Drive applications that would run in Linux. That's true. But I also think that it's possible to create a tool that would be open that would let you do it. Now, I know many of you are going to point out that Drive is an open source tool. However, it's command line only. Although that's not a problem and it's not that difficult to use, you really do have to do some special configuration and setup in order to use it. I would be curious, though, to hear if there are other users out there that are using Drive, and if you do anything special to set it up. Are you putting Drive in cron to have it run frequently? What is it that you do? Oops. My other pet peeve: font consistency among apps and competing standards. So if you're going to use Linux, for example, I'm using GNOME and it uses GTK for its supported standard for all the applications. Here's the problem with that. Waiting for the jet to go by. So, for example, right now I have LibreOffice and I have open here a basic window, right? And you can see the different font sizes and how everything is rendered and easy to read. But let's look at an application that actually does not support GTK, or it's not correctly supported. So here's my screen recorder that I'm using right now. Take a look at the font size. You can see that there's definitely a rendering issue. I was hoping if I went into KDE that it would work correctly, but it doesn't work correctly in KDE either. So something here, and I'm not sure what. I've done a little bit of research, but I have to do quite a bit more research to find out what. Just doesn't support my high DPI screen, and it's not picking up the GTK settings for GNOME. So for me, that's a really big problem. It really stems from the high DPI display and the fact that support just isn't 100% yet. And you would think by now that it would be, but the problem with Linux is that it's often behind the curve in terms of hardware, as much as 2 years, possibly 3 years. And I'm sure there's a few of you out there going to say, well, all you need to do is go into the command line and do this and do that. And I've tried quite a few different things. I haven't just assumed that it's the way it is, but unfortunately I have not been able to get that to work correctly. I could go down at a lower resolution as well, but I don't want to, because that's why I bought the high DPI display in the first place. Okay, number 3, Linux OS support. So let's say you do run into a problem, something simply isn't running. Where do you go for your support? Now, granted, Windows support these days isn't that great either. If you really want support, you're going to have to pay for it. But if something goes wrong on your system, it's up to you to figure it out. And usually it involves going into different forums and seeing if you can find the reason why it isn't working. And in some cases, it can be a tremendous amount of research. Which leads me to my next problem. Complex and very time-consuming fixes. Case in point, I was trying to work with an application and I could not get it to work. Actually, it was VirtualBox. I could not get VirtualBox to compile on my system, and I couldn't figure it out. I probably spent about 12 hours looking through the forums over a 2-day period, reading, trying different things. Some people said uninstall the version that comes through Yum or DNF and then download the actual code and then compile it direct, which I did, and still it didn't work. Then I finally stumbled on a forum, and one of the people in the forum, after it was 4 pages, said, I disabled Secure Boot, which is a feature in the BIOS that was designed with Windows in mind, and everything worked fine. So I disabled Secure Boot, and I was actually able to get back into VirtualBox. It compiled just fine, and everything went perfectly. But that took a long time, and sometimes we don't have that much time to waste. Now compare that with Windows 10 and OS 10 with Apple. Big difference. Having used all 3 platforms pretty much equally, I found that with OS 10, there's very little to worry about. The software usually works correctly. With Windows 10, yes, there are some problems. So far, they've been minor. Most of my problems stem from the Windows 10 store. That's a whole nother video. And finally, number 5, SE Linux. I know what you're going to say. You can't turn SE Linux off because it's designed to protect your system, and that is correct. If I am running Linux servers, which I do, I definitely leave SE Linux enabled, and I use the granular approach and turn off only those components of SE Linux that I need. In the case of my workstation, lump it or like it, I have decided to turn off SE Linux. So I actually have it set for permissive, same thing basically. Would I consider turning it back on? Yes, definitely. At this point, all my apps are installed. I could go ahead and turn it on, do a little bit of testing, and see if I have any issues or problems, and then look at my log and see if I need to just make one small adjustment for SE Linux. So those are my top 5 pet peeves with Linux. Let me know, do you have any pet peeves with Linux? And if so, what are they? I'd like to hear what you have to say. If you get a chance, like and subscribe. It's nice to know if you do enjoy the videos, and I'll see you next time.